What happens when the most powerful ruler in the galaxy discovers that her beloved human husband has been hiding something that could reshape the entire universe? Princess Queen Zarathiel of the Valdorian Empire thought she knew everything about humans after marrying Captain Marcus Chen, the first human to ever set foot in her star system. But when a routine diplomatic crisis threatens to destroy everything she holds dear, Marcus reveals a secret that makes her question everything she believed about his seemingly primitive species. The Valdorians are masters of the galaxy, telepathic, technologically superior. Humans? They're the newcomers, the curious explorers with their small ships and simple technology. Or so everyone believes. But what if humanity's greatest strength isn't their technology or their numbers? What if it's something far more dangerous, something that could either save the galaxy or destroy it completely? And what happens when the woman who rules half the known universe realizes that her husband's people might be the most terrifying force the cosmos has ever seen? Get ready for a story where love meets cosmic power, where secrets span light years, and where one human's revelation will change the fate of every civilization in existence. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the universe is the truth about who you really are. Princess Queen Zarathiel stood on the crystal balcony of her palace, watching the 3 moons of HFY Prime cast their silver light across the capital city below. Her forearms were folded behind her back in the traditional pose of contemplation, while her mind reached out through the psychic network that connected all Valdorians across their empire. Tonight, however, the usual hum of a billion thoughts felt different, somehow disturbed. The door to her chambers whispered open, and she didn't need to turn around to know who had entered. After 3 years of marriage, she could sense Marcus's unique human presence from across the palace. Unlike every other sentient species they had encountered, humans seemed to exist in a strange bubble of psychic silence. It had been one of the first things that had fascinated her about him when his exploration ship had arrived in their system. "You're worried about something?" Marcus said softly, his footsteps silent on the polished floor as he approached. Even after all this time, his ability to move without making a sound still amazed her. Valdorians were naturally graceful, but humans had a different kind of stealth that seemed almost supernatural. "The council session today was troubling," Zara replied, still gazing out at the city. "Ambassador Kethmore from the hegemony brought disturbing reports. There are whispers of rebellion in the outer systems again. Some of the newer colonies are questioning our authority." Marcus moved to stand beside her, his much smaller frame dwarfed by her 8-foot height, but somehow his presence always made her feel more grounded. She had never understood how someone so physically unremarkable could have such a calming effect on her. Humans were small compared to most galactic species, with their average height barely reaching 6 feet. And they lacked any of the obvious advantages that had allowed other races to achieve spaceflight telepathy, natural armor, enhanced strength, or advanced sensory capabilities. "What kind of rebellion?" Marcus asked, and she noticed that edge in his voice that appeared whenever discussions turned to threats against her empire. In 3 years, she had never quite figured out if his protective instincts came from love or from some deeper human trait she didn't understand. "The usual complaints," Zara sighed, her breath creating small clouds in the cool night air. "They say we're too controlling, that our telepathic oversight is invasive. Some are even calling for complete independence." The hegemony representatives seemed particularly pleased to deliver this news. With trust steady, she felt Marcus tense beside her, though his expression remained calm. This was another human trait that continued to puzzle her, the ability to completely mask their emotions when they chose to. Valdorians could sense each other's feelings through their psychic connection, making deception nearly impossible within their society. But humans were like walking enigmas, their thoughts and emotions completely hidden unless they chose to reveal them. "How serious is the threat?" Marcus asked. "Serious enough that the Council is considering sending the 4th Fleet to make an example of one of the rebellious worlds," Zara replied, finally turning to face her husband. "Admiral Thexera believes that a show of force will end this before it spreads further." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. Zara found herself studying his face, something she often did when trying to understand the thoughts hidden behind those strange, single-colored eyes. Most species had multiple eye colors or patterns that shifted with their emotions, but human eyes remained frustratingly constant. "Which world are they planning to target?" Marcus asked finally. "Kefara 7. It's a mining colony in the Outer Rim, recently settled by a mix of species, including some of your human colonists who requested permission to establish an outpost there." "The rebellion started there, according to our intelligence." She saw something flicker across Marcus's face so quickly that she almost missed it. After 3 years of marriage, she had learned to watch for these micro-expressions that seemed to be the only window into human thoughts. "Marcus?" she pressed gently. "Is something wrong?" He was quiet for another long moment before turning to face her fully. When their eyes met, she saw something she had never seen before, a kind of deep sadness mixed with what might have been fear. "Zara, there's something about humans that you don't know," he said slowly. "Something that my people have been very careful to keep hidden since we first made contact with galactic civilization." A chill ran through Zara that had nothing to do with the night air. In all their time together, Marcus had never spoken about his species with such gravity. She had always assumed that humans were simply one of the younger races still developing their technology and culture, content to explore and trade rather than compete for galactic power. "What do you mean?" she asked. Marcus moved away from the balcony, beginning to pace in the way he did when he was working through a complex problem. It was a uniquely human gesture that she had grown to find endearing, but tonight it made her nervous. "When humans first developed faster-than-light travel, we weren't like other species," Marcus began. "Most races achieve spaceflight because they need to expand, to find new resources, or because they're fleeing some threat. Humans left Earth for a different reason." "What reason?" Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "We were bored." Zara blinked, certain she had misheard. "Bored? Earth was conquered, Zara. Not by aliens, but by humans themselves. We had ended war, solved poverty, cured disease, and achieved what most species would consider a perfect society. But humans aren't built for perfect societies. We're built for challenge, for struggle, for the unknown." A peaceful Earth was slowly driving our entire species insane. This was not what Zara had expected to hear. She had always assumed that humans, like most species, had left their homeworld out of necessity or ambition. The idea that they had achieved perfection and then abandoned it seemed almost incomprehensible. "Darer, so you developed space travel to find new challenges?" she asked. "Not exactly," Marcus replied, his expression growing darker. "We developed space travel to find new wars." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Zara felt her primary heart skip a beat as the implications began to sink in. "What do you mean, new wars?" she asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. Marcus began pacing again, his movements more agitated now. "Humans are the only species in the galaxy that evolved from pure predators, Zara. Every other intelligent race we've encountered evolved from prey animals, or scavengers, or creatures that found ways to avoid conflict. That's why most galactic civilizations naturally tend toward cooperation and peaceful expansion. But humans evolved from pack hunters who survived by killing things bigger and stronger than themselves. War isn't just something we do, Zara. It's what we are. It's coded into our DNA, our psychology, our entire way of thinking. We see every problem as something to be defeated, every challenge as an enemy to overcome." Zara found herself taking an unconscious step backward. In 3 years of marriage, she had seen Marcus as gentle, thoughtful, and peaceful. The idea that he and his entire species were somehow built for war seemed impossible. "That can't be true," she said. "I've known you for 3 years, Marcus. I've met other humans. You're not violent people." Marcus stopped pacing and gave her a look that was both sad and terrifying. We're not violent because we choose not to be, Zara. But that choice requires constant effort. Every human you've ever met has been carefully selected and extensively trained to interact with other species safely. We call them ambassadors, but they're really just the humans who are best at suppressing their natural instincts. The pieces were starting to come together in Zara's mind, forming a picture that she didn't want to see. The human colonies in our space are all populated by ambassadors and their families, Marcus confirmed. Humans who have volunteered to live permanently among other species, to serve as bridges between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. But they represent less than 1% of our actual population. What about the other 99%? Marcus walked back to the balcony, staring out at the peaceful city below. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. They're still on Earth, Zara. 400 billion humans living in the most advanced military society the galaxy has ever seen, waiting for someone to give them a reason to leave their world. Zara felt the blood drain from her face. 400 billion. The entire Valdorian Empire, spanning 1,000 worlds, had a total population of barely 200 billion. And if Marcus was telling the truth, Earth contained twice that number of beings whose entire evolutionary purpose was warfare. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Marcus turned back to her, and she saw tears in his eyes, another uniquely human trait that she had always found touching but now seemed ominous. Because if your Fourth Fleet attacks Kephara 7, you'll be killing human colonists. And according to the treaties my government signed when we first made contact with galactic civilization, any attack on human civilians by a foreign power will be considered an act of war. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She sank into one of the chairs near the balcony, her mind racing through the implications. If the Valdorian Empire attacked Kephara 7 and killed human colonists, it would mean war with a species of 400 billion natural-born warriors. Your government would go to war over a single colony? She asked weakly. My government has been looking for an excuse to go to war for over a century, Marcus replied. Human society is becoming unstable again. Crime rates are rising, mental illness is increasing, and there have been 3 attempted coups in the past 20 years. Earth needs a war, Zara, and if your empire provides one, they'll take it. Zara buried her face in her hands, trying to process everything she had just learned. The man she had married, the species she had welcomed into her empire, the entire foundation of human Valdorian relations, all of it was built on a lie. Why didn't you tell me this before? She asked. Because I hoped it would never matter, Marcus said, moving to kneel beside her chair. I hoped that humans could continue to live peacefully among other species, that we could find ways to channel our nature into exploration and discovery instead of conquest. I hoped that by marrying you, I could help build a bridge between our peoples that would prevent this day from ever coming. But now it has come, Zara said. Now it has come, Marcus agreed. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the revelation settling between them like a living thing. Finally, Zara looked up at her husband, the man who had just told her that his entire species was a potential threat to everything she had sworn to protect. What happens now? She asked. Marcus stood and walked back to the balcony, his shoulders slumped with the weight of his confession. When he spoke, his voice carried a tone she had never heard before, cold, calculating, and utterly without emotion. Now you have to decide whether to trust me, he said. Because there's more, Zara, much more. And if you want to prevent a war that will destroy both our civilizations, you're going to need to hear all of it. Zara stood slowly, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. In the span of a single conversation, her entire worldview had been shattered. The husband she loved was a member of a warrior race that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. The peaceful human colonists in her empire were apparently the tip of an iceberg that concealed the most dangerous military force in galactic history. And somehow, the fate of both civilizations now rested in the hands of their unlikely marriage. Tell me everything, she said finally. No more secrets, Marcus. If we're going to face this together, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Marcus nodded, his expression grim. Then sit down, Zara, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you thought you knew about humans, about Earth, and about why my people really came to the stars. As Zara settled back into her chair, she couldn't help but notice that the city below seemed different somehow. The peaceful lights that had always represented the stability and prosperity of her empire now looked fragile, vulnerable to forces she was only beginning to understand. The night was still young, but Zara already knew that by dawn nothing would ever be the same again. Marcus walked to the center of the room and stood there for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. When he began to speak again, his voice had taken on a formal quality that Zara had never heard before, as if he were delivering a briefing rather than talking to his wife. To understand what humans really are, you need to understand our history, Marcus began. Not the sanitized version that we've shared with the galactic community, but the real story of what happened on Earth. Zara settled deeper into her chair, her four hands clasped tightly together. She had studied human history as part of her preparation for marriage, but she was beginning to suspect that everything she had learned was carefully edited propaganda. Human civilization is approximately 10,000 years old, Marcus continued. For the first 9,000 years, we did exactly what our nature demanded. We fought. We fought over territory, resources, ideas, gods, skin color, language, and sometimes just because we were bored. We became very, very good at killing each other. That's not unusual, Zara interjected. Most species go through violent phases during their development. Most species have wars, Marcus corrected. Humans perfected war. By the time we achieved industrial technology, we had developed methods of warfare that could have exterminated our entire planet dozens of times over. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical agents, automated killing machines. We created horrors that most species never even imagine. Zara felt a chill run through her. The Valdorian Empire had weapons, of course, but they were designed primarily for defense against external threats. The idea of a species developing the capability to destroy their own world seemed insane. "What stopped you?" she asked. Marcus gave her a look that was both bitter and proud. "We didn't stop. We won!" "What do you mean you won?" "The last great war on Earth ended about 400 years ago," Marcus explained. "It wasn't like the wars that came before it. This one was fought with the specific goal of ending all future wars by establishing absolute dominance. One human nation, led by a military alliance called the Terran Federation, conquered the entire planet." Zara tried to imagine what such a war would have looked like, but her mind struggled with the concept. Valdorian history included conflicts, but nothing approaching the scale Marcus was describing. "How many died?" she asked quietly. 7 billion, Marcus replied without emotion. Nearly half the population of Earth at the time. The number hit Zara like a physical blow. 7 billion deaths in a single war was more than the total population of most star systems. The idea that any species could inflict such casualties on itself and survive was almost incomprehensible. "But you did survive," she said. "We survived and we learned," Marcus confirmed. The Terran Federation realized that the problem wasn't human nature. It was the lack of a proper outlet for it. So they restructured human society around the one thing we were truly good at: warfare. Marcus began pacing again, his movements precise and controlled. Zara noticed that even his casual gestures had a military bearing that she had never recognized before. "Every human child is tested at age 5 for military aptitude," Marcus continued. "By age 10, they're placed in specialized training programs based on their strengths. Infantry, naval operations, aerospace command, intelligence, logistics, weapons development, strategic planning. We have more military specializations than most species have total professions." "That sounds horrible," Zara said, thinking of her own childhood spent learning art, philosophy, and the responsibilities of leadership. "It sounds horrible to you because you're not human," Marcus replied. "But humans thrive in that environment. Crime virtually disappeared once everyone had a purpose. Mental illness dropped to almost zero. Scientific advancement accelerated because we were constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible in warfare. We built the most advanced, efficient, and deadly military society in the galaxy's history, and every human in it was genuinely happy. Zara shook her head, struggling to understand how a society based entirely on warfare could function, let alone prosper. "But you said Earth was peaceful when humans developed space travel," she said. "Earth became peaceful because there was nothing left to fight," Marcus explained. The Federation had achieved perfect order, perfect efficiency, and perfect military readiness. But a military without an enemy is like a predator without prey. It starts to turn on itself. "Is that when you left Earth?" "Not immediately," Marcus said. "First, we tried to find other solutions. We created massive training exercises that simulated real warfare. We developed competitive sports that channeled human aggression. We even experimented with controlled conflicts between different military units. But none of it worked. Humans need real challenges, real enemies, real consequences." Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at Zara. "We need war." The simple statement hung in the air between them like a weapon. Zara found herself studying her husband's face, looking for some sign that he was exaggerating or lying. But his expression was completely serious, almost clinical. "So you developed space travel to find enemies to fight," she said slowly. "We developed space travel to find something worthy of fighting," Marcus corrected. "Earth's military strategists knew that any war between human factions would result in the complete destruction of our civilization. We needed external threats, challenges that would unite humanity, instead of dividing it. And when you found other species?" Marcus was quiet for a moment before answering. "When we first encountered other intelligent life, it was both the best and worst thing that had ever happened to humanity. Why? Because we realized that we were completely alone in our nature," Marcus said. "Every other species we encountered had evolved from creatures that survived through cooperation, adaptation, or avoidance. They had developed technologies and societies based on those instincts. They were everything that humans were not: peaceful, collaborative, and rational." Zara began to understand the magnitude of what Marcus was telling her. Humans weren't just a warrior race. They were the only warrior race in a galaxy full of species that had evolved to avoid conflict. "You could have conquered everyone," she said. "We could have conquered everyone," Marcus agreed. "A single human military division could have overwhelmed most star systems. Our entire fleet could have conquered the galaxy within 50 years. Why didn't you?" Marcus smiled for the first time since their conversation began, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "'Cause conquest wasn't the goal. We didn't want slaves or territory or resources. We wanted worthy opponents. We wanted a challenge that would push human civilization to its limits. But other species weren't challenging enough. Other species weren't even in the same category as us," Marcus said bluntly. "Fighting them would have been like a pride of lions attacking a herd of sheep. There would be no honor in it, no growth, no satisfaction. It would just be slaughter." Zara felt a mixture of relief and horror at this revelation. Relief that humans had chosen not to conquer the galaxy, and horror at the casual way Marcus discussed the military capabilities of his species. "So, what did you do?" she asked. "We made a decision that probably saved every civilization in the galaxy," Marcus replied. "We decided to hide." "Hide?" "The Terran Federation created the Ambassador Program," Marcus explained. "We selected humans who could function peacefully among other species, gave them specially modified ships with deliberately limited capabilities. The humans that everyone has met are basically human diplomats pretending to be representative of our entire species," Marcus confirmed. "They've been carefully trained to suppress their natural instincts, to appear weak and harmless, and to maintain the illusion that humanity is just another peaceful species exploring the galaxy." Zara thought about the humans she had met over the years. They had seemed curious and friendly, with a childlike enthusiasm for discovery. The idea that they were all essentially actors, playing a role, was deeply disturbing. How long can you maintain the deception? She asked. We've maintained it for over a century, Marcus said. But it's becoming more difficult. The human population on Earth has grown to over 400 billion, and they're all getting restless. The military exercises aren't enough anymore. The competitive programs are losing their appeal. There are riots in the major cities, and some military commanders are openly calling for expansion into space. What kind of expansion? Marcus walked back to the balcony and stared out at the city. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. The kind that would end with human flags flying over every inhabited world in the galaxy. Zara felt her blood turn to ice. The casual way Marcus discussed the conquest of the galaxy made it clear that he wasn't speaking hypothetically. This was apparently something that human military leaders were actively considering. And you think attacking Kefara 7 would trigger this expansion? She asked. I know it would, Marcus replied. The treaties that established human colonies in other star systems included specific provisions for their protection. Any attack on human civilians by a foreign government automatically triggers what we call the protection protocols, which are full military mobilization of Earth's population and immediate deployment of the Terran Federation Navy to secure human assets throughout the galaxy. Zara tried to imagine what 400 billion humans mobilizing for war would look like, but her mind simply couldn't grasp the scale of such an event. How large is your navy? She asked. Marcus was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a mixture of pride and terror. The Terran Federation Navy has been in continuous construction for over 2 centuries, he said. We have approximately 50,000 active warships, ranging from single-person fighters to city-sized dreadnoughts. We have another 200,000 ships in reserve that could be activated within weeks, and our shipyards can produce more vessels in a single year than most civilizations build in a century. The numbers were so large that they seemed almost meaningless to Zara. The entire Valdorian Imperial Navy consisted of fewer than 10,000 ships, and that was considered one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. Why are you telling me this? She asked. If your people want war so badly, why are you trying to prevent it? Marcus turned from the balcony and walked back to her, kneeling beside her chair. When he took her hands in his, she noticed that they were shaking. Because I love you, he said simply. And because the war that would come wouldn't be the clean, honorable conflict that humanity dreams of. It would be a slaughter that would destroy both our civilizations. How can you be sure? Because I know my people, Zara. Humans don't fight wars to win them. We fight wars to prove that we're the strongest, the smartest, and the most dangerous species in existence. We would turn this galaxy into a graveyard just to demonstrate our superiority. Zara looked into her husband's eyes and saw something that terrified her more than all the military statistics he had shared: the absolute certainty of someone who understood his people's nature completely. What can we do? She asked. I don't know, Marcus admitted. But we have to try something. Because if the 4th Fleet attacks Kefara 7 tomorrow, by the end of this year there won't be a single independent civilization left in the galaxy. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the impossible situation settling around them. Finally, Zara stood and walked to her communications console. What are you doing? Marcus asked. Calling an emergency session of the Imperial Council, Zara replied. If we're going to prevent a war that could destroy the galaxy, we need to start now. You're going to tell them about humanity? Zara paused, her hand hovering over the communication controls. She thought about the reaction her revelation would cause among the council members, most of whom viewed humans as harmless curiosities from a backward star system. No, she said finally. I'm going to tell them that the 4th Fleet's mission has been canceled due to new intelligence about the situation on Kefara 7. They'll demand to know what intelligence. Then I'll tell them that my human husband has provided insights into the colonial situation that require further investigation, Zara replied. It's not a lie exactly. Marcus stood and moved to join her at the console. And after that, After that, you and I are going to figure out how to save both our peoples from a war that nobody should want, but that your species apparently needs." Marcus nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Where do we start?" Zara activated the communication system and began sending emergency summons to council members across the Empire. As the responses began coming in, she turned to her husband. "We start by buying time," she said. "And then we find a way to give your people what they need, without destroying everything we've built. And if we can't?" Zara looked out at the peaceful city below, knowing that by this time tomorrow, everything might have changed forever. "Then we try to minimize the damage when 400 billion human warriors decide to remind the galaxy why their species survived when 7 billion of their own people couldn't." The emergency session of the Imperial Council convened 3 hours before dawn in the great circular chamber beneath the palace. Zara sat in her elevated chair at the center of the room, surrounded by the holographic projections of her most trusted advisors. Some appeared from their estates on HFY Prime, others transmitted from distant worlds across the Empire. The blue-tinged light of the holograms cast strange shadows on the ancient walls, creating an atmosphere that seemed appropriate for the gravity of their discussion. Admiral Thexara was the first to speak, her massive form dominating the projection from her flagship. The military commander's scaled hide bore the ritual scars of a dozen campaigns, and her 6 eyes fixed on Zara with barely contained impatience. "Your Majesty, the 4th Fleet is prepared to depart for HFY 7. My ships are loaded with sufficient firepower to reduce that rebellious colony to ash and serve as an example to any other systems considering defiance of Imperial authority." "The mission is cancelled," Zara replied without preamble. The silence that followed was so complete that Zara could hear the subtle hum of the holographic projectors. Finally, Chancellor Veltar, the Empire's chief diplomat, leaned forward in his chair. "Cancelled, Your Majesty? May we ask why?" Zara had spent the past 3 hours preparing for this question, working with Marcus to craft an explanation that would be truthful without revealing the full scope of the human threat. "New intelligence has come to light regarding the situation on HFY 7, she said. "The rebellion may not be what it appears to be. My husband has provided insights into the human colonial situation that suggest a military response could have unintended consequences." Admiral Thexara's expression darkened. "Unintended consequences? Your Majesty, with respect, the humans are barely capable of interstellar travel. Their ships are primitive, their weapons are limited, and their total population in our space numbers fewer than 1 million. What possible consequences could they pose?" Zara glanced at Marcus, who sat quietly in a chair behind her position. They had agreed that he would remain silent unless directly addressed, but she could see the tension in his posture as he listened to the Admiral's dismissive assessment of his species. "The consequences would not necessarily be military in nature," Zara said carefully. "The humans have been valuable trading partners and have contributed significantly to several of our research initiatives. A military action that results in human casualties could damage our relationship with their government. Their government consists of a few exploration vessels and some mining operations," scoffed General Corthan, the commander of the Imperial Guard. "We could replace their entire contribution to our empire with a single trade agreement from the hegemony." "That may be true," Zara acknowledged, "but we should be certain of our facts before taking irreversible action. I propose sending a diplomatic mission to HFY 7 first to assess the true nature of the rebellion." "Diplomacy is weakness," Admiral Thexara stated flatly. "Every day we delay sends a message to our enemies that the Empire can be challenged without consequence. If we do not act decisively now, we will face rebellions on a dozen worlds within the year." The Admiral's words carried weight with several of the council members, and Zara could see support for the military option building around the chamber. She needed to find a way to redirect their attention without revealing the true threat that Earth represented. "What if the rebellion on HFY 7 is not organic?" she asked. "What if it's being sponsored by one of our rivals? The hegemony has been increasingly aggressive in their expansion efforts. The consortium has been making overtures to several of our client states. If either of them is using this situation to test our resolve, a premature military response could be exactly what they're hoping for. This argument had more impact. The possibility of external manipulation was something the Council took seriously, and Zara saw several members reconsidering their positions. Chancellor Veltar nodded thoughtfully. It would be consistent with hegemony tactics to sponsor a rebellion and then use our response to justify their own military expansion. They've been looking for an excuse to challenge our borders for decades. Precisely, Zara said, seizing the opening. Which is why we need more information before we act. I propose sending a small task force to HFY 7 with orders to investigate the situation thoroughly. If the rebellion is externally sponsored, we expose it and gain valuable intelligence about our enemy's methods. If it's a genuine internal uprising, we can address it with the appropriate level of force. Admiral Thexera was clearly unhappy with this proposal, but several other council members were nodding agreement. After a few minutes of discussion, the motion was approved by a narrow margin. Very well, the Admiral said with obvious reluctance. I'll prepare a reconnaissance force to investigate HFY 7, but Your Majesty, if we find evidence of genuine rebellion, I strongly recommend that we respond with overwhelming force. Mercy is often interpreted as weakness by our enemies. Noted, Admiral, Zara replied. How long will you need to organize this investigation? 72 hours to reassign the appropriate ships and brief the commanders on their new mission parameters. Excellent. That will give us time to prepare diplomatic initiatives as well. Zara turned to Chancellor Veltar. I want you to reach out to both the hegemony and the consortium. Let them know that we're aware of the situation on HFY 7 and that any interference in our internal affairs will be met with appropriate consequences. Of course, Your Majesty. The session continued for another hour, with various council members discussing the logistics of the new approach and debating the potential implications of delayed action. Finally, Zara dismissed the council and retired to her private chambers with Marcus. That went better than I expected, Marcus said as soon as the door closed behind them. We bought ourselves 72 hours, Zara replied. But what happens when your people learn that we were planning to attack HFY 7 in the first place? Even though we canceled the mission, won't they see the intent as hostile? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question. That depends on how the information is presented to them. The Terran Federation doesn't monitor our colonies directly, but they do have intelligence networks throughout the galaxy. If they learn about the planned attack after the fact, it could still trigger the protection protocols. Could still, not would? The triggers are somewhat discretionary, Marcus explained. If the Federation believes that the threat has passed and that diplomatic solutions are being pursued, they might choose not to escalate. But that decision would be made by the War Council on Earth, and I have no influence with them. Zara sank into her chair, suddenly feeling the weight of 3 sleepless hours. Marcus, I need to understand something. If your people are as warlike as you say, why did you become an ambassador? Why did you choose to live peacefully among other species instead of joining their military? Marcus walked to the window and stared out at the pre-dawn sky. When he spoke, his voice was filled with an emotion that Zara couldn't quite identify. Because I've seen what we're capable of, he said. I was born on Earth, Zara. I grew up in the Federation system. I know what a society built entirely around warfare looks like, and I know what it does to the people who live in it. You said everyone was happy? Everyone was functional, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. Humans in the Federation are efficient, disciplined, and purpose-driven, but they're also completely focused on their military roles. They don't create art unless it serves a tactical purpose. They don't explore philosophy unless it relates to strategy. They don't form personal relationships unless they enhance unit cohesion. Zara tried to imagine such a society, but it seemed alien to her. Valdorian culture placed enormous value on personal growth, artistic expression, and individual relationships. It sounds horrible, she said. It's not horrible if you're designed for it, Marcus replied. But I wasn't. Some humans are natural soldiers born to thrive in military environments. Others, like me, are natural explorers. We're drawn to the unknown, to discovery, to building bridges between different worlds and cultures. The Federation recognized this and created the Ambassador program to use people like me productively. So you volunteered to leave Earth. I volunteered to leave behind everything I had ever known in order to learn about the rest of the galaxy, Marcus said. It was the most terrifying and exciting decision I had ever made. And when you met me, Marcus turned from the window and smiled the first genuine smile Zara had seen from him all night. When I met you, I realized that I had found something worth staying for. Something worth protecting. Something worth fighting for, if it came to that. The words sent a chill through Zara. Fighting for? If the Federation decides to go to war, Zara, I won't be going back to Earth to join them. I'll be staying here, with you, to defend the empire we've built together. Against your own people? Against anyone who threatens the life we've created, Marcus said firmly. Human, Valdorian, or otherwise. Zara stood and moved to embrace her husband, feeling the solid warmth of his smaller frame against her. For a moment, the crisis facing their civilization seemed less important than the simple fact that they were together. What do we do now? She asked. Now we try to contact Earth directly, Marcus said. The Ambassador program maintains a communication network that can reach the Federation government within a few days. If I can explain the situation to them before they learn about it through their intelligence networks, we might be able to prevent escalation. Will they listen to you? I don't know, Marcus admitted. I've been out of contact with Earth for 3 years. The political situation there may have changed significantly, but it's our best option. Then let's do it, Marcus nodded and pulled away from her embrace. I'll need access to a high-powered communication array, one with encryption capabilities. The message will have to be sent through several relay stations to reach Earth, and we can't risk it being intercepted by other species. The Imperial Communications Center has everything you'll need, Zara said. I'll arrange access immediately. As Zara moved to her communication console, Marcus caught her arm gently. Zara, there's something else you need to know before I send this message. She turned to face him, seeing the familiar expression of someone preparing to reveal another uncomfortable truth. What is it? The message I'm going to send will reveal our marriage to the Federation government, Marcus said. Up until now, they believed I was simply stationed on Valdoria Prime as a diplomatic observer. They don't know that I married the ruler of the Empire. Why does that matter? Marcus was quiet for a moment before answering. Because under Federation law, any ambassador who forms permanent relationships with foreign nationals is required to submit to a loyalty evaluation before being allowed to continue their mission. And if you fail this evaluation, then I'm recalled to Earth and replaced with someone whose loyalties are considered more reliable. Zara felt her heart stop. The idea of losing Marcus now, when they needed each other more than ever, was almost unbearable. We'll face that when it happens, she said firmly. Right now, preventing a galactic war is more important than our personal situation. Marcus nodded, but she could see the pain in his eyes. I know. I just wanted you to be prepared for the possibility that saving our civilizations might cost us our marriage. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen, Zara replied. We'll find a solution that protects everyone, including us. As they left the chamber to head for the communications center, Zara couldn't help but wonder if such a solution actually existed. They were trying to prevent a war between species that had evolved for completely different purposes, while maintaining a relationship that both governments might see as a betrayal. The task ahead of them seemed impossible, but as she walked beside her husband through the corridors of the palace, Zara realized that impossible tasks were apparently a human specialty. If anyone could find a way to navigate the crisis ahead of them, it would be the man who had chosen love over loyalty and peace over war. The question was whether the rest of the galaxy would give them enough time to succeed. The Imperial Communications Center occupied 3 full levels beneath the palace. its corridors lined with quantum relay stations and encryption servers that could reach every corner of the galaxy. Zara had been here countless times, but tonight the familiar hum of the equipment seemed ominous rather than reassuring. She and Marcus were escorted to the most secure transmission chamber, a windowless room surrounded by layers of electromagnetic shielding. "The system is configured for maximum encryption," reported Chief Technician Mordas, an elderly Valdorian whose cybernetic implants glowed softly in the dim light. "Your transmission will be routed through 17 relay stations across 8 star systems. Even if intercepted, it would take decades to decrypt without the proper keys." "Thank you," Marcus replied, settling into the chair before the main console. "I'll need approximately 1 hour to compose and transmit the message. Of course, I'll monitor the system from outside. Please let me know if you require anything else." As the technician left, Zara moved to stand behind Marcus's chair. The console before them displayed a map of the galactic communication network, with pulsing lines showing the available transmission routes to Earth. "I've never seen you nervous before," she observed, noting the tension in his shoulders. "I've never tried to prevent a war before," Marcus replied, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "And I've definitely never had to explain to my government why I married an alien queen without permission." "Is that really what this message is about? Explaining our marriage?" Marcus began typing, and text appeared on the screen in the angular script of human standard language. Zara could read enough of it to follow the basic meaning. "It's about much more than that," Marcus said as he worked. "I'm trying to explain the entire political situation in our region of space, why attacking Kephra 7 would be a strategic mistake, and why the Federation should consider a new approach to galactic relations." "What kind of new approach?" "That's the complicated part." Marcus paused in his typing and turned to face her. "Zara, what if there was a way to give humans the challenge they need without starting a war?" "What do you mean?" Marcus turned back to the console and pulled up a different screen, one showing detailed star charts of the galaxy's unexplored regions. "The galaxy is vast. Even with all our civilizations combined, we've only explored about 30% of the available star systems. There are entire regions that remain completely unmapped, possibly containing resources, technologies, or even hostile species that could represent genuine challenges for humanity." Zara studied the charts, beginning to understand his proposal. "You want to redirect human expansion into unexplored space rather than conquered territory." "Exactly. Instead of fighting existing civilizations, humans could be exploring the unknown regions of the galaxy. We could be the advanced scouts for galactic civilization, pushing the boundaries of known space and dealing with whatever we find there." The idea had merit, but Zara could see several potential problems with it. "Would that be enough to satisfy human nature?" she asked. "Fighting unknown enemies instead of known ones?" "It would be better than fighting known allies," Marcus replied. "And if we found something genuinely dangerous in the unexplored regions, something that threatened all galactic civilizations, then humanity would have the war it needs without having to attack peaceful species." "And if you don't find anything dangerous?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Then we keep looking until we do. The galaxy is too large and too old for everything in it to be peaceful. There has to be something out there that would give humans the challenge they need." It was a reasonable theory, but it raised another question that Zara was almost afraid to ask. "Marcus, what happens if you do find something dangerous? Something powerful enough to threaten entire civilizations? Do humans have the capability to handle that level of threat?" Marcus's expression became grim. "Zara, there's something else about human military capabilities that I haven't told you yet." She sighed, settling into a nearby chair. "More secrets? The numbers I gave you earlier about our fleet strength? Those were the conventional forces. Ships designed to fight other spacefaring civilizations using standard weapons and tactics. There are unconventional forces? The Terran Federation has been preparing for threats that might exist beyond our current understanding," Marcus explained. "Weapon systems designed to fight enemies we haven't met yet. theoretical technologies based on physics that most species haven't even discovered, contingency plans for scenarios that seem like science fiction. Zara felt a familiar chill. Every time she thought she understood the full scope of human capabilities, Marcus revealed another layer of complexity. What kind of scenarios? Hostile artificial intelligences, reality warping entities, time-traveling conquerors, interdimensional invaders, parasitic hive minds. The Federation War Council has spent 2 centuries developing responses to every theoretical threat they could imagine, and they built weapons to fight these theoretical enemies. They built weapons that could destroy entire star systems if necessary, Marcus said quietly. Humanity doesn't just have the largest military in the galaxy, Zara. We have the most advanced, most versatile, and most terrifying military force that any species has ever created. The weight of this revelation settled on Zara like a physical burden. She had been worried about 400 billion human soldiers conquering the galaxy. Now she was learning that those soldiers had access to weapons that could destroy it completely. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because if we're going to propose redirecting human expansion into unexplored space, you need to understand what we might find there and what we're capable of doing about it." Marcus turned back to the console and resumed typing his message. As Zara watched the text scroll past, she tried to process the implications of everything she had learned. Her husband represented a species that had evolved for war, had perfected the art of warfare beyond any other civilization's comprehension, and had built weapon systems designed to fight enemies that existed only in theory. And yet he had chosen to marry her and dedicate his life to preventing the very war that his people seemed to want. "The message is almost ready," Marcus said. "But before I send it, I need to ask you something important." "What?" "If the Federation accepts my proposal and redirects human expansion into unexplored space, would the Valdorian Empire be willing to support that expansion?" "What kind of support?" "Technical assistance, supply lines, shared intelligence, maybe even joint missions in some cases. Humans are excellent at warfare, but we're not as advanced in some areas as other species. Valdorian telepathic abilities could be invaluable for first contact situations. Your medical technology could help treat injuries from unknown pathogens or environmental hazards." Zara considered the proposal. It would mean essentially partnering with humanity in their expansion efforts, providing support for what could become the most dangerous military force in galactic history. "What would the Empire gain from such an arrangement?" she asked. "First, access to any resources or technologies discovered in unexplored space," Marcus replied, "and protection from any threats that might exist in those regions. If humans encountered something dangerous enough to threaten galactic civilization, we would deal with it before it could reach Valdorian space." It was a compelling offer, but it would also mean trusting humanity with capabilities that could be turned against any species at any time. "I'll need to discuss this with the Council," Zara said finally. "I understand." "But Zara, if this proposal is going to work, I need to be able to tell the Federation that they have at least one major galactic power supporting the idea. Without that, they'll see it as just another way for other species to limit human expansion." Zara stood and walked to the star chart display, studying the vast, unexplored regions that Marcus was proposing to send his people into. The idea of redirecting human aggression away from known civilizations was appealing, but it would also mean unleashing that aggression on whatever they might find in the darkness between the stars. "Send your message," she said finally. "Tell them that the Valdorian Empire is prepared to discuss a partnership in exploring unknown space. I'll work on convincing the Council." Marcus nodded and turned back to the console. "The transmission will take about 6 hours to reach the first relay station, then another 18 hours to reach Earth through the network. We should have a response within 2 days. And what do we do in the meantime?" "We prepare for whatever answer we get," Marcus replied. "Because if the Federation rejects this proposal, we're going to have to find another way to prevent a war that could end both our civilizations." As Marcus initiated the transmission sequence, Zara found herself staring at the star chart display. The unexplored region seemed to pulse with possibility and danger, vast areas of space that could contain anything from paradise to nightmare. She was proposing to send the most dangerous species in galactic history into those regions, armed with weapons designed to destroy star systems and motivated by an evolutionary need for warfare. It was either the most brilliant diplomatic solution in history or the most catastrophic mistake any civilization had ever made. "Message transmitted," Marcus announced. "Dad, now we wait. Now we prepare," Zara corrected, "because regardless of what your government decides, we still have 72 hours before Admiral Thexera's ships reach Kefara 7. If your Federation doesn't respond in time, or if they reject our proposal, we're going to need a backup plan." "What kind of backup plan?" Zara looked at her husband, seeing the man who had chosen to reveal his people's greatest secrets in order to prevent a war that no one wanted but that his species apparently needed. "The kind that might require both of us to make choices we never wanted to make," she said. "Because if we can't redirect human aggression toward unexplored space, we might have to find a way to satisfy it here in known space without destroying the civilizations that already exist." Marcus stood and moved to join her at the star chart display. Together, they stared at the map of the galaxy, each lost in their own thoughts about the impossible task ahead of them. "There is one other option," Marcus said quietly. "What?" "If the Federation rejects our proposal and insists on military expansion into occupied space, I could refuse to cooperate with them." Zara turned to stare at him. "What would that accomplish?" "Ambassadors are technically officers in the Federation military," Marcus explained. "If I formally refuse orders and declare myself in rebellion against Earth, it might buy us more time to find a diplomatic solution. It would also make you a traitor to your own species." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "It would." The simple acceptance in his voice made Zara realize the full scope of what her husband was offering. He was willing to become an enemy of his own people in order to protect hers. "I won't let you do that," she said firmly. "We'll find another way." "And if we can't," Zara took his hand in hers, feeling the warmth and strength of his smaller fingers. "Then we face whatever comes together," she said. "But we're not giving up yet." "We still have time and we still have options. Your people may be warriors, but they're also intelligent. They have to see that there are better ways to find the challenges they need than destroying everything that already exists." Marcus nodded, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. As they left the communications center to return to the palace, Zara couldn't help but wonder if intelligence and reason would be enough to overcome 400 years of human evolution toward warfare. The answer to that question was traveling through space toward Earth at the speed of light, carrying with it the hopes and fears of every civilized species in the galaxy. 2 days passed in a blur of tense waiting and careful preparation. Zara had spent most of that time in closed session with the Imperial Council, carefully presenting Marcus's proposal for human expansion into unexplored space. The debate had been intense, with some members viewing the partnership as an opportunity for unprecedented discovery, and others seeing it as an alliance with a potentially dangerous species. Marcus had remained largely confined to their quarters, monitoring communication channels for any sign of a response from Earth. The silence from his homeworld was becoming increasingly ominous as the deadline for Admiral Thexera's mission approached. On the morning of the third day, everything changed. Zara was in her private study reviewing the latest intelligence reports from across the Empire, when Marcus burst through the door with an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of relief, terror, and something that might have been excitement. "We have a response," he announced, holding a data tablet that was still warm from the secure printer. "What do they say?" Zara asked, setting aside her reports. Marcus sat heavily in the chair across from her desk, staring at the tablet as if it contained a live explosive. "The Federation War Council has accepted our proposal," he said slowly. "They're authorizing immediate deployment of the 3rd Deep Space Fleet to begin exploration operations in the Outer Rim territories. Zara felt a surge of relief so intense that it was almost overwhelming. That's wonderful news. They're accepting the partnership? Yes and no, Marcus replied, his expression remaining troubled. They're accepting the concept of redirected expansion, and they're willing to work with the Valdorian Empire on joint exploration missions. But there are conditions. What kind of conditions? Marcus looked up from the tablet, and Zara saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. I'm being recalled to Earth for a loyalty evaluation, he said quietly. Immediate departure, no exceptions, no delays. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. After everything they had accomplished, after finding a solution that could prevent galactic war, the Federation was taking Marcus away from her. When? She asked. The courier ship TFS Resolution is already en route to HFY Prime. It will arrive in 18 hours. I'm to be aboard and departing for Earth within 12 hours of its arrival. Can you refuse? Not without being declared a deserter and having the entire proposal rejected, Marcus replied. My recall is apparently part of the evaluation process. The War Council wants to determine whether my marriage to you has compromised my ability to serve human interests. Zara stood and began pacing, her mind racing through the implications. Without Marcus to serve as liaison between their civilizations, the entire partnership could collapse before it even began. What happens to the exploration program while you're gone? She asked. That depends on the results of my evaluation, Marcus said. If I'm cleared for continued service, I'll be returned here to oversee human-Valdorian cooperation. If I'm not? If you're not, then I'll be replaced with someone whose loyalties are considered more reliable. Zara stopped pacing and turned to face her husband. How long does a loyalty evaluation take? Anywhere from a few weeks to several months, Marcus replied. It depends on how thorough the War Council wants to be. Several months? Zara felt her heart sink. Marcus, we don't have several months. The situation with the outer colonies is still unstable. Without human involvement in exploration activities, the other council members will start questioning whether this partnership is worth maintaining. Marcus stood and moved to the window, staring out at the city below. There's something else, Zara. Something that makes the timing of this recall particularly suspicious. What do you mean? The response from the War Council came through military channels, not diplomatic ones. That suggests they're viewing this entire situation as a potential security threat, rather than an opportunity for cooperation. Zara joined him at the window, trying to read his expression. You think they suspect something? I think they know more about the situation here than they're admitting, Marcus replied. The Federation has intelligence networks throughout the galaxy. It's possible they learned about the planned attack on Kefara 7 before I sent my message, which would mean they think I might be compromised, that my marriage to you has made me unwilling to protect human interests even when they're directly threatened. The implications of this possibility were staggering. If the Federation believed that Marcus had chosen Valdorian interests over human ones, his recall might be permanent regardless of the evaluation results. Is there any way to delay your departure? Zara asked. Not without confirming their suspicions, Marcus replied. But Zara, there might be another option. What? Marcus turned from the window and took her hands in his. Come with me. What? The recall order specifies that I'm to report to Earth for evaluation, but it doesn't prohibit me from bringing my wife. If you came with me, you could present the Valdorian position directly to the War Council. Zara stared at him, trying to process the suggestion. Travel to Earth, the home world of 400 billion human warriors, to negotiate directly with their military leadership. The idea was both terrifying and intriguing. Would they even listen to me? She asked.
They'd have to, Marcus replied. You're the ruler of the largest allied empire in the galaxy.
Even if they don't trust me, they can't afford to ignore you completely. And if they decide I'm a threat? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then we'll face that together. Before Zara could respond, her communication console chimed with an urgent message. She activated the display and found herself looking at Admiral Thexera's scarred face. "Your Majesty, we have a problem," the Admiral announced without preamble. "Long-range sensors have detected unidentified ships approaching the Kefara system. Large ships using propulsion technology we don't recognize." Zara felt her blood turn to ice. "How many ships?" "At least 50, possibly more. They're still too far out for detailed scans, but their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Marcus moved to look over Zara's shoulder at the display. "Admiral, how long until they reach Kefara 7? "Approximately 6 hours at their current speed." "Your Majesty, I respectfully request permission to deploy the 4th Fleet immediately. If these are hostile forces, Kefara 7 is defenseless against them." Zara looked at Marcus, seeing her own fears reflected in his expression. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. "Do unknown ships approaching the same system where human colonists lived, just as the Federation was recalling their primary ambassador. Admiral, maintain your ships in ready status but do not advance toward Kefara 7, Zara ordered. "I want continuous monitoring of the situation, but no hostile actions unless directly fired upon." "Your Majesty, if we wait for them to attack first, it may be too late to protect our citizens." "Understood. But we need more information before we act." Zara closed the communication channel and turned to Marcus. "This isn't a coincidence, is it?" "No," Marcus replied grimly. "This is a test." "A test of what?" "Of whether the Federation can trust me to protect human interests, and whether the Valdorian Empire can be relied upon as an ally." Marcus moved to his own communication console and began entering commands. "I'm contacting the Resolution. If this is what I think it is, we need to accelerate our departure." "What do you think it is?" Marcus looked up from his console, his expression grim. "I think those ships are human, Zara. I think the Federation sent them to create a crisis that would test both of our loyalties." The possibility sent a chill through Zara. If Marcus was right, then the approaching fleet represented not an external threat, but an elaborate test of their partnership. A test that they could very easily fail. "How can you be sure?" she asked. "Because it's exactly the kind of strategy the War Council would use," Marcus replied. "Create a situation that forces both sides to choose between their own interests and their alliance. See how we respond when human lives are potentially at stake. And if we respond incorrectly, then the partnership is over before it begins, and the Federation proceeds with their original expansion plans." Zara sank into her chair, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation they faced. Every choice seemed to lead to more complications, more dangers, more opportunities for catastrophic failure. "What do we do?" she asked. Marcus finished his communication to the Resolution and turned to face her. "We do exactly what they don't expect us to do. We go to Earth together. And we turn their test into an opportunity to prove that our partnership is stronger than their suspicions. How? By showing them that we're willing to risk everything to make this alliance work. If I'm right about those ships being human, then the War Council is watching our every move. They want to see if we'll choose each other over our respective peoples. And will we?" Marcus moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "We're going to choose both. We're going to prove that our marriage isn't a weakness or a conflict of interest. It's the foundation for a partnership that could reshape the galaxy." Zara looked into her husband's eyes and saw the same determination that had attracted her to him in the first place. He was proposing to walk directly into the heart of human military power, to face the judgment of the most dangerous species in galactic history, and to do it together. "When do we leave?" she asked. "The Resolution will dock in 16 hours. We need to be ready to depart immediately. And the situation at Kefara 7, we'll monitor it from the ship. If those are human vessels, they won't attack unless we fail their test. If they're not human, then Admiral Thexera has permission to defend the system with full force." Zara stood and moved to her private safe, removing a small crystalline device that pulsed with soft blue light. It was the Imperial Seal, the symbol of her authority over 1,000 worlds and 200 billion beings. If we're going to Earth to negotiate the future of galactic civilization, we're going to do it properly, she said, activating the Seal's communication function. I'm calling a formal council session. If this partnership is going to work, the entire Empire needs to be behind it. Can you get their support? I can get their attention, Zara replied. The rest will depend on whether we can convince them that trusting humanity is worth the risk. As they prepared for what might be the most important journey in galactic history, Zara found herself thinking about the strange path that had brought them to this moment. 3 days ago, she had been a ruler dealing with a minor colonial rebellion. Now she was preparing to travel to the homeworld of a species that could conquer or destroy the entire galaxy, betting everything on the hope that love and trust could overcome evolution and instinct. It was either the most romantic gesture in history or the most catastrophic mistake any civilization had ever made. In a few hours, they would begin to find out which. Marcus, she said, as they prepared their departure materials, whatever happens on Earth, I want you to know that I don't regret any of this. Not our marriage, not the decisions we've made, not the risks we're taking. He stopped packing and looked at her with an expression of profound gratitude. Even if we're wrong about everything, even if this destroys both our civilizations, even then, she replied. Because the alternative was to live in fear of what might happen instead of fighting for what should happen. Marcus nodded and returned to his preparations. In that case, Your Majesty, let's go change the galaxy. As the Resolution approached Valdorian space, carrying with it the hopes and fears of every species in the galaxy, Zara realized that Marcus had been wrong about one thing. Humans weren't the only species capable of impossible tasks. Sometimes, love was capable of a few impossible things itself. The royal princess queen was amazed when her human spouse unveiled his secret. HFY Stories. Best HFY Adventures.